Amanda Roberts, a 42-year-old woman, sat nervously in her apartment in Boston. She had spent the last few months getting to know a man named Ethan online. They met on a dating app, and their connection had been instant. They had exchanged countless messages, late-night phone calls, and even video chats. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to understand her in ways no one else ever had. Amanda had been married once, but her husband had passed away years ago in a car accident. Since then, she had focused on raising her two kids and working as a freelance graphic designer. She hadn't been interested in dating until she met Ethan. He was younger than her, in his early 30s, but that didn't bother her. There was something about him that made her feel alive again. For the first time in years, Amanda was excited about the idea of love. Ethan lived in a small town in upstate New York, about a 6-hour drive from Boston. After weeks of messaging, he had suggested that they meet. Amanda was hesitant at first, but he reassured her that it would be worth it. He promised he'd make the trip worthwhile, and they could finally see if the chemistry they shared online was real in person. The day of the meeting finally arrived. Amanda packed a small suitcase, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She had told her children she was going to visit a friend for the weekend, but in reality, she was traveling to meet Ethan. As she drove through the countryside, she couldn't stop thinking about what it would be like to finally meet the man who had been on her mind day and night. She arrived at the address Ethan had sent her, a secluded house on the edge of a forest. The house was large, old, and somewhat isolated, surrounded by tall trees. Amanda felt a chill run down her spine, but she quickly brushed it off. She told herself it was just nerves. She texted Ethan to let him know she had arrived. Moments later, he replied, telling her to come inside. Amanda took a deep breath, grabbed her bag, and walked up to the front door. As she knocked, she felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. Was this really what she wanted? But before she could second-guess herself, the door swung open. Ethan stood in front of her, a tall man with dark brown hair and a welcoming smile. He looked just like his pictures, and for a moment, Amanda felt a sense of relief. He was everything she had imagined. His eyes twinkled as he stepped aside to let her in, his warmth and charm filling the space. "Welcome," he said softly, his voice sending a pleasant shiver through her. "I'm so glad you made it." Amanda smiled, her heart racing. This was it. This was the beginning of something new, something exciting. But as she stepped inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The house was too quiet, and the air felt still. Ethan led her into the living room, where a fire crackled softly in the fireplace. It was cozy, warm, and inviting, but there was an underlying tension that Amanda couldn't explain. As they sat down, she tried to push her unease aside. After all, she had traveled all this way to meet him. The moment they had been building up to had finally arrived. "So, tell me about your life," Ethan asked, his gaze intense. Amanda took a deep breath, deciding to start with small talk. She talked about her kids, her work, and her life back in Boston. Ethan listened intently, nodding along. But as the conversation went on, Amanda couldn't help but notice the strange way he was looking at her, like a predator watching its prey. There was a moment of silence between them, and Amanda felt her stomach tighten. She glanced around the room, her eyes landing on the door that led outside. It felt like the walls were closing in on her, but she quickly pushed the thought away. Maybe it was just nerves. After all, this was supposed to be a pleasant meeting, a chance to finally connect. Ethan smiled at her again, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm glad you came, Amanda," he said. "I've been waiting for this." Amanda smiled back, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Something about his words, his tone, felt off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but a small voice inside her warned her that this meeting might not be everything she had imagined. As the evening wore on, Amanda found herself growing more and more uncomfortable. Ethan's charm, once so captivating, now seemed forced. His questions were becoming increasingly personal, more probing than she was used to. What had started as small talk about work and family had shifted to questions about her past relationships, her deepest fears, and even her most intimate memories. She tried to remain calm, hoping this was just his way of getting to know her better. But something about the way he asked felt intrusive, like he was fishing for information, not out of genuine curiosity, but for something else. "You know," Ethan said, leaning forward in his chair, his voice softer now, "I think we have a real connection." I've never met anyone like you before." Amanda smiled awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. She didn't want to seem cold or distant, but his intensity was making her feel like she was under a magnifying glass. Every word, every gesture seemed loaded with more meaning than it should have been. Her nerves started to edge into panic. Ethan continued, his eyes not leaving hers. "I've always been attracted to older women. You're different from the others I've met, Amanda. You're more mature. I like that." His words sent an uncomfortable chill through her, but she tried to laugh it off. "I'm just a regular woman," she replied, attempting to keep the tone light. "Of course," he said quickly, leaning back in his chair, his tone now slightly dismissive. "But there's something special about you. I can feel it." Amanda could feel her heart race now, the nervous excitement from earlier giving way to real unease. She glanced around the room, trying to steady her breathing. The fire was still crackling softly, the only sound in the room apart from their voices. She wanted to tell him that she should get going, that it was getting late. But something in her gut told her it wasn't the right time. Ethan had made her feel so welcomed when she first arrived. Was she overreacting? "How about a drink?" Ethan suggested, his voice smooth and confident. "I have some wine if you'd like." Amanda hesitated for a moment. It wasn't that she didn't want to drink. She did. But there was a voice in the back of her mind warning her to be cautious. She had been raised to always trust her instincts. And right now, her instincts were telling her to leave. But she couldn't bring herself to say it aloud. "Sure," she said, forcing a smile. "I'd like that." Ethan got up and walked to the small kitchen area behind the living room. As he opened a cabinet, Amanda took a deep breath. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The man she had been talking to online, the man she had felt so comfortable with over texts and video calls, seemed so different in person. There was a coldness beneath the charm, a tension in the air that she couldn't shake off. He returned with 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Amanda. She took it with a forced smile, trying to push the knot of fear in her stomach down. "To new beginnings," Ethan said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Amanda repeated, her voice shaky. She clinked her glass against his, but her hand trembled slightly as she did. The wine tasted bitter in her mouth, not from the flavor, but from the unease gnawing at her. They sat in silence for a moment, both sipping their drinks. Amanda tried to focus on the fire, the warm glow of the flames. But no matter how hard she tried, her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan. He seemed different now, almost distant, as if he were hiding something behind those dark eyes of his. "So, tell me about your last relationship," Ethan asked, his voice suddenly low. "What went wrong?" Amanda's heart skipped a beat. She had been open with him about her past, but the question now felt invasive. She wasn't sure how much more she wanted to share. There was no need to dive into old wounds, especially not with someone she had just met. "I'd rather not talk about it," she said, trying to keep her tone firm but polite. Ethan didn't seem put off. Instead, he leaned in slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Why not? I'm just trying to understand you better." The shift in his demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. It was like he was trying to break her down, get her to open up, even when she didn't want to. Amanda's pulse quickened. She set her glass down on the coffee table, the clink of it ringing louder than she expected. "I think I should go," she said suddenly, standing up from the couch. The words felt like a relief as they left her lips. "It's getting late, and I have a long drive ahead of me." Ethan didn't move. He just stared at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was an uncomfortable silence. Then, slowly, he stood up as well. "Is everything okay, Amanda?" he asked, his voice low, almost predatory. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say, but she could feel it in her bones. Something was terribly wrong. She had to leave. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, taking a step toward the door. But Ethan's eyes followed her every move. As she reached for the door handle, he stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Don't leave," he said, his voice now hard, his charm slipping away. Amanda's heart raced as she looked up at him, realizing just how trapped she felt in this situation. Something was off, and the man who had seemed so warm and inviting was now a stranger. A dangerous stranger. Amanda's heart thudded in her chest as Ethan stood between her and the door. The warm glow of the fire in the corner of the room felt distant now, like a cold reminder of what she had ignored. Earlier, her instincts telling her to leave. But now it was too late. She was trapped in the house, and the man she had come to meet. The man who had once seemed so charming and kind was now blocking her way. "Let me go, Ethan," Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper. She tried to steady her breathing, her hands trembling as she reached for the door handle again. Ethan didn't move. His gaze was intense, but there was something else in his eyes. Now, a darkness that Amanda hadn't seen before. It was as though he was sizing her up, deciding what to do next. He didn't speak, but the silence in the room was suffocating, each second stretching longer than the last. "Why are you acting like this?" Amanda asked, trying to keep her voice calm, though she could feel the panic rising in her chest. Ethan finally spoke, his tone almost casual, but there was an edge to it. "I just want to spend more time with you, Amanda. You're different from all the others. I can tell you feel the connection too." Amanda stepped back, her eyes darting toward the window. The night outside was dark and quiet, nothing but the rustling of trees in the wind. There was no one nearby to help her, no one who could hear her if things went wrong. The realization hit her like a cold slap. She had made a mistake by coming here. "I need to go," Amanda said again, more forcefully this time, her voice trembling with urgency. Ethan's expression shifted. His lips curled into a small, almost sinister smile. "You think you can just leave? It's not that simple." Amanda's breath caught in her throat as the panic set in. The door was right there, but Ethan was blocking it. He wasn't going to let her leave. She could feel it in the air, a suffocating pressure that made her skin crawl. Suddenly, Ethan moved toward her. His footsteps were heavy on the wooden floor, each one echoing through the room. Before Amanda could react, he reached out and grabbed her by the arm. His grip tight and unyielding. "Let go of me," Amanda shouted, yanking her arm away, but his hold was too strong. She could feel the strength in his fingers, the way he twisted her wrist, making her stumble forward. "Shoo," Ethan murmured, his voice low and soothing. "You're not going anywhere, Amanda. You're mine now. You came here for a reason, didn't you? To be with me." The words sent a chill through her, and Amanda's mind raced as she struggled to break free. This wasn't the man she had been talking to for months. This wasn't the kind, caring person who had promised her they would be together. This was something far darker, something dangerous. She shoved him away with all her strength, managing to break free from his grip for a moment. Her body surged with adrenaline as she backed away, her eyes scanning the room for any means of escape. But the fear was clouding her thoughts. She didn't know where to go or what to do next. Ethan didn't chase her immediately. He stood there, watching her with an unsettling calmness. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amanda's heart pounded in her ears, her pulse racing in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but the fear paralyzed her. Her body felt heavy, like it was rooted to the floor. "You should have never come here." "Amanda," Ethan finally said, his voice soft but cold. He stepped toward her again, but this time, his movements were slower, more deliberate. "You came all this way, didn't you? Don't tell me you're not curious about what we could be together." Amanda shook her head desperately. "No, Ethan. I never wanted this. I just wanted to meet someone who cared about me." Ethan's smile faded, replaced by something much darker. "I do care about you," he said, his voice now cold as ice. "And I'm going to make sure you're with me. Forever." Amanda's stomach turned. She turned toward the door again, but it felt like her legs were made of stone. She couldn't think straight. Everything was moving too fast, too violently. She needed to escape, but Ethan's presence felt like a wall, one that she couldn't break through. "Ethan, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Let me go? I don't want any of this." But his face hardened. The man she had once trusted, the man she had believed to be her chance at happiness, was now a stranger, one with malicious intent. "I don't think you understand," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not going anywhere, Amanda. Not now. Not ever." Before Amanda could react, Ethan lunged at her. She gasped, barely managing to dodge his grasp. But as she turned to run, she felt something cold and sharp against her neck. The world seemed to stop in that moment as she froze, her mind racing in a panic. Ethan had a knife. Amanda's breath hitched in her throat as the cold steel of the knife pressed against her neck. She could feel its sharp edge against her skin, just a whisper away from cutting deep. Panic surged through her body like a tidal wave, overwhelming her senses. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she refused to let herself fall. "Not now. Not like this. Ethan, please." Her voice cracked, desperate and shaky. She was trying to stay calm, to think clearly, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart in her ears. The knife was still at her neck, and she could feel the pressure growing, like he was daring her to make the wrong move. I told you. Ethan's voice was cold, low, and menacing. You're mine now. You shouldn't have come here if you weren't ready to accept that. Amanda swallowed hard, trying to hold back the rising tears. She had never been this terrified in her life. The man she thought she knew, the man she thought she had been building a connection with, was now a monster. He had transformed right before her eyes, and she didn't know how to escape him. She stood frozen for a moment, calculating her next move. But all her mind could focus on was the knife that was now slowly pressing harder into her flesh. I won't fight you, Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper, though she had no intention of giving in. She was stalling, trying to keep him talking, hoping for a moment to think. Just let me go, Ethan. I'll leave. You don't have to do this. Ethan's lips curled into a twisted grin. You really think I'll just let you go, Amanda? You came all this way, spent all this time, and now you think I'll let you leave? That's not how this works. Not with me. In that moment, Amanda realized the truth. He didn't care about her. He didn't care about the connection they had talked about, the words they had shared over the phone and through messages. He had only ever been interested in controlling her, in trapping her in this house, in this nightmare. Amanda's pulse quickened, but she kept her gaze steady, focusing on the small sliver of hope that remained in her. She had to get away. She couldn't just let him win. Slowly, very slowly, she took a step back, trying to keep her movements as smooth and unthreatening as possible. She had to give him the illusion that she wasn't fighting back, that she was submitting. The knife was still against her neck, but she was trying to think about where the nearest exit was. The door, the window. Ethan seemed to relax, but the knife remained where it was, a constant reminder of the danger she was in. That's right, he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. Just stay calm. I don't want to hurt you. Not yet. Amanda's eyes darted toward the side table near the couch. There, just within reach, was a heavy glass lamp. It wasn't much, but it was something she could use to fight back. With every ounce of strength she had left, Amanda grabbed the lamp and swung it toward Ethan. The glass collided with his head with a sickening crack, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. Ethan staggered back, momentarily stunned, and Amanda took her chance. She ran. Her heart was pounding so loudly in her chest that it felt like it was going to explode. She could hear Ethan shouting behind her, his voice filled with rage. But she didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. She needed to get out. She dashed toward the front door, her fingers scrambling to unlock it. The adrenaline pumping through her veins made her movements frantic and clumsy. She could hear Ethan getting closer, his footsteps thundering behind her, but she wasn't going to stop. Finally, the door clicked open. She pushed it hard, her body launching forward into the cold night air. She could taste the fresh, crisp air, and for a brief moment, she felt a surge of hope. She was almost free. But then, Ethan's hand gripped her arm, yanking her back with terrifying strength. She cried out as she stumbled, falling to the ground. The grass was wet beneath her hands, the cold earth pressing into her palms. Ethan's face was twisted in fury, his eyes wild with madness. He yanked her back up, dragging her away from the door and into the shadows. You think you can just escape? You think you're better than me? He growled, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Amanda struggled, kicking and clawing at his hands, but his grip was like iron. She could feel her strength waning, her energy draining as the fight continued. She needed to think of something else, anything else, to get out of this. Ethan dragged her toward the woods behind the house. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches reaching out like claws. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves, and the further they went, the more isolated she felt. There was no one out here, no one to hear her screams. A moment of clarity hit her then. This was it. If she didn't escape now, she might never get another chance. She had to act fast, with all the strength she could muster. Amanda stomped on his foot with the heel of her boot. Ethan let out a shout of pain, his grip faltering for just a moment. She took advantage of it, twisting her arm free from his grasp and breaking away. Without looking back, Amanda ran deeper into the woods. Her legs were sore, her body exhausted, but the fear of what would happen if she didn't make it out kept her moving. The darkness around her seemed to swallow her whole, but she pushed forward, praying that she was heading in the right direction. And then she heard it. The sound of footsteps behind her, growing closer. Ethan wasn't giving up. Amanda's heart sank, but she couldn't stop now. She had to find help, or she would die out here alone. Amanda's lungs burned as she pushed her body through the thick woods, the underbrush scratching at her legs and the cold air stinging her face. Her heart pounded against her ribcage with every step she took, the rhythmic sound of her footfalls, a constant reminder of how close Ethan was behind her. Her mind raced. She couldn't let him catch her. She couldn't let him drag her back to that house. The thought of what he might do if he caught her made her stomach turn. But she couldn't afford to stop, not even for a second. Every branch that snapped beneath her feet, every rustle in the trees, sent waves of panic through her. Ethan's footsteps were closer now, louder and more insistent. He was following her, tracking her like prey, and she was running out of time. Her eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, that could help her. The woods seemed endless, the darkness overwhelming. She had no sense of direction, no idea which way would lead her to safety. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't let fear paralyze her. Suddenly, a branch reached out from the side and caught her arm, pulling her off balance. She stumbled and fell hard against the ground, the impact knocking the breath out of her. Her hands scraped against the rough earth as she tried to catch herself. But before she could get back on her feet, she heard a voice behind her. "Where do you think you're going, Amanda?" Ethan's voice was smooth, almost mocking. He had caught up with her. She scrambled to her feet, a surge of terror rushing through her. There was no more running, no more hiding. She had to make a stand now or face whatever horrors Ethan had planned for her. Her eyes flicked around again, desperately searching for something, anything, that could give her an advantage. There was nothing, just trees, darkness, and the relentless sound of Ethan's footsteps drawing nearer. Then, through the shadows, she spotted it, a fallen tree, its thick trunk lying across the path. It was a risk, but it was the only chance she had. With all the strength she had left, Amanda bolted toward the tree. She reached it just as Ethan's voice came again, closer this time. "You can't hide from me, Amanda. You think you can escape? I've been waiting for this. You're mine. You always will be." She reached the trunk and quickly scrambled over it, using her arms and legs to propel herself as fast as possible. But she was slower now, exhausted and desperate, her body aching from the strain of the chase. And then, just as she thought she had made it to the other side, a hand shot out from the darkness and grabbed her ankle. "Gotcha!" Amanda screamed as she was yanked backward, her body jerking violently as Ethan's grip tightened. She kicked and struggled, her hands reaching desperately for anything to stop him. But his strength was overwhelming. His hand wrapped around her ankle like a vice, pulling her back toward him with an unnatural force. She felt her heart drop to her stomach as he dragged her across the ground, the sharp rocks and twigs digging into her skin. "Let me go," she shouted, her voice hoarse and frantic. "Please, Ethan, I didn't do anything to you." His laugh was cold and devoid of any emotion. "You're mine, Amanda. And now, you're going to learn what it means to be mine." Tears sprang to her eyes, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She had to get out. She had to fight. With one final, desperate move, Amanda twisted her body and reached for the rocks that littered the ground. Her fingers closed around a sharp stone, and with all the strength she could muster, she swung it at Ethan's hand. It connected with a sickening thud. Ethan howled in pain as his grip loosened, and Amanda wasted no time. She scrambled to her feet, barely able to steady herself before she bolted forward once again, this time without looking back. Her feet flew across the forest floor, her legs burning, her lungs gasping for air. She didn't know how much longer she could keep this up, but she wasn't going to let him take her again. Not after everything. She heard Ethan's furious shout behind her, but it only fueled her desperation. She had to keep running. And then, through the trees, she saw a flicker of light. A cabin. Her heart leapt in her chest. The light was faint, but it was there. Maybe someone was inside. Maybe she wasn't alone after all. Amanda pushed herself harder, her body nearly giving out from exhaustion as she sprinted toward the light. She could hear Ethan getting closer, but she was almost there. She had to be. Her hand reached out for the door, and just as she touched the handle, she heard a noise from behind her, a crackling of leaves. Ethan was right there, Amanda's fingers fumbled as she twisted the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. She tried again, panic seizing her chest, but then, just as she thought it was over, she heard the sound of a lock turning from inside. The door flew open, and a man stood in the doorway, his face filled with confusion. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern, but Amanda didn't have time to explain. She didn't have time to do anything but push past him, rushing into the safety of the cabin. She slammed the door behind her, her back pressed against it as she slid to the floor, her body shaking with fear and exhaustion. The man looked at her with wide eyes, his expression full of alarm. What happened? Who was that? Amanda couldn't speak. She couldn't find the words to explain. All she could do was shake her head, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had made it. For now. But Ethan was still out there. The door was locked behind her, but Amanda knew it wouldn't hold forever. Her heart raced as she leaned against the wooden frame, gasping for air, trying to calm her frantic mind. She could still hear the rustling of leaves, the sound of footsteps outside, the relentless pursuit of Ethan. He wouldn't give up. She had no illusions about that. The man who had opened the door stared at her, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. Who is he? What's going on? Amanda wiped her face with trembling hands, struggling to find the words. He's been chasing me. He's going to kill me." The man took a step back, his eyes widening as he processed the gravity of her words. "What? Why? Who is he?" "I don't know," Amanda whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought I knew him. I thought he was someone else. But I was wrong. I just wanted to meet him, but it's all a lie. He's a monster." The man hesitated for a moment, his expression softening as he took in her frantic appearance. "You need to stay calm. We'll figure this out, okay?" He reached for a phone on the counter and dialed quickly. "I'm calling the police." Amanda nodded, though it did little to calm her nerves. The cabin, small and dimly lit, felt like a cage now, no longer a safe haven. The walls seemed to close in around her as the reality of the situation settled in. She wasn't just hiding from Ethan. She was running for her life. And even with the police on the way, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was already too close. The man spoke into the phone briefly, then hung up. "Help is on the way, but it'll take them a while to get here. Do you have a weapon or anything you can use to defend yourself?" Amanda shook her head, the fear creeping into her voice once again. "No, I don't. I don't have anything." "You need to get to a more secure place," he said, his voice steady. "This cabin's isolated. We need to move." He grabbed a crowbar from the corner of the room and handed it to her, his hands firm but not unkind. "Take this. If he tries to get in, you need to fight back." Amanda took the crowbar from him, the weight of it grounding her, but it did little to calm her racing heart. Her mind flashed back to the woods, to Ethan's face, twisted in anger, his grip on her ankle, dragging her through the dirt. She was still so close to him, too close, and the thought of facing him again sent waves of nausea through her. The man stood by the door, watching her with concern. "What's your name?" "Amanda," she replied, her voice hoarse. "Amanda Roberts." "Amanda, listen to me," the man said urgently, his tone shifting to something more serious. "You're not safe here. We need to move. If he's out there, he knows you're inside now. He's not going to just walk away." Amanda shook her head, the weight of it all threatening to break her. "I can't move. I can't leave. What if he's waiting for me? What if he—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Her throat tightened with fear. The man cut her off gently. "You need to trust me. I'll protect you. But you have to stay with me. I'll make sure you get out of this." Amanda looked at him, her eyes full of doubt. She had no reason to trust this stranger, but in that moment, he was her only chance. Ethan was out there, hunting her. And if she stayed in this cabin, she might as well be a sitting duck. "Okay," she whispered, barely able to speak. "I'll go with you." The man moved swiftly, pulling open the door and peering out into the night. The soft glow of the moon barely illuminated the area outside, and the silence was deafening. There was no sign of Ethan, but Amanda knew that wouldn't last. The predator was still out there, still hunting her. "Stay close," the man ordered, his voice calm and authoritative. He moved toward the back of the cabin, where a small trail led through the trees. Amanda followed him without question, her heart pounding in her chest. Every shadow in the woods seemed to whisper of danger. Every snap of a twig made her jump. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Amanda's legs ached, her body drained of energy, but she kept moving. She had no choice. Her survival depended on it. Finally, the man stopped in his tracks, and Amanda nearly collided with him. He held up a hand, signaling for her to be quiet. "I think we're too exposed here," he whispered. "We need to get to a safe house. My truck is about a mile from here. If we can get there, we'll be able to drive to a police station." Amanda's thoughts were a whirlwind. A safe house? A truck? She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Everything felt like a blur. But there was one thing she knew. Ethan wasn't going to stop until he found her. She had to keep moving. The man turned back, looking at her with a grim expression. "Can you run?" Amanda nodded, though her legs felt like lead. "Yes, I can run." "Good," he said, his voice low. "We need to make it to the truck. No more stops. Stay focused." They sprinted through the woods, the darkness swallowing them up, and Amanda could only focus on the rhythm of her breathing, the pounding of her heart, and the sense of terror that still lingered in the air. Then, just as they reached the edge of the woods, Amanda heard it, a noise behind them, faint but unmistakable. The sound of footsteps. Ethan was following them. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Amanda's heart seemed to stop in her chest as she looked over her shoulder. The fear that had been building inside her for hours intensified with each step Ethan took. He was closing in. "Run," the man beside her whispered, urgency in his voice. "Don't stop. Just keep running." They burst out of the woods and onto a narrow dirt road. The man's truck, a beat-up old pickup, sat parked in the distance, its headlights flickering in the night like a beacon of hope. But the sound of Ethan's pursuit was relentless, his steps quick and furious. He was gaining on them. "Go!" Amanda gasped, her legs burning with exhaustion. But she pushed herself harder, feeling the weight of every step. The truck was within sight now, but she knew they weren't going to make it in time. Ethan would catch them before they could reach safety. The man reached the truck first, throwing open the door and jumping inside. "Come on, Amanda. Get in." Amanda hesitated for only a moment, then threw herself toward the truck, her hands shaking as she scrambled into the passenger seat. The man slammed the door shut just as she buckled herself in, and the engine roared to life. He threw the truck into reverse and gunned the engine, sending them speeding down the dirt road. Amanda turned to look behind them, her eyes wide with fear. Ethan was running after them, but he was too far now, his figure becoming smaller in the rearview mirror. They were getting away, but was it enough? The truck bounced over the uneven ground, tires kicking up dust as they sped through the woods. Amanda's thoughts were spinning. She could hardly believe what was happening. She was alive, but only by a thread, and Ethan was still out there. "Are we safe?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is he still following us?" The man didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Not yet. I don't think he's close anymore, but we're not out of the woods just yet." Amanda's breathing was shallow, her pulse still racing. She felt like she was drowning in the tension, the raw emotion of the night overwhelming her. She had barely escaped with her life, but the feeling of Ethan's eyes on her, the darkness in his stare, lingered in her mind. What if he wasn't finished? What if he found them again? "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I don't even know your name." The man glanced at her, his eyes serious but filled with something almost protective. "My name's Alex," he said. "I'm a volunteer at the local shelter. I'm the one who called the cops. They should be on their way, but I wanted to make sure you were safe first." Amanda nodded, trying to steady her breath, but her mind was still spinning. Alex had helped her, he had saved her. But who was Ethan really? How had she not seen the danger until it was almost too late? "He's a monster," Amanda muttered under her breath. "He's not human. I thought he cared about me, but he's just a predator." Alex finished for her, his voice low. "I know. He's done this before. You're not the first woman he's targeted." Amanda turned to him, her eyes wide. "What? He's done this before?" Alex nodded grimly. "There's been a string of disappearances in the area over the past few months. Women who were last seen online, meeting up with someone they thought they knew. Ethan's been using fake profiles to lure them in. I'm not sure how many, but he's been getting bolder." Amanda felt a wave of nausea hit her. She hadn't been the first victim, and she wouldn't be the last. The realization made the fear that had been gnawing at her stomach even worse. If she hadn't escaped when she did, what would have happened to her? Would she be another name on a list of missing women? Alex glanced over at her, his expression softening. You're strong, Amanda. You got out. You're going to make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else. Amanda nodded, though her throat felt tight. I just want him gone. I just want to be safe. They drove in silence for a few moments. The only sound the hum of the engine and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. The truck bounced over the uneven road, but it felt like the tension inside Amanda's chest was slowly starting to ease. They were getting away. They were going to be okay. But then, as they rounded a bend in the road, Amanda heard it. The sound of another engine. A car. Alex's expression changed in an instant. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal, the truck lurching forward. Amanda's heart skipped a beat as she looked in the rearview mirror. The headlights of a car were gaining on them. Fast. Damn it, Alex muttered, swerving the wheel to avoid a pothole. He's found us. Amanda's pulse spiked once again. Ethan had followed them. He was never going to stop. They'll be here soon, Alex said, his jaw clenched. We need to outrun him. Hold on tight. The truck sped faster, the tires kicking up dirt and rocks as they tore through the woods. Amanda's hands gripped the door handle, her body tense with fear. She had no idea what was going to happen next, but she wasn't going to give up. She couldn't. She had survived so far, and she wasn't going to let Ethan win. The truck barreled down the road, the engine roaring, but the sound of Ethan's car was still growing louder behind them. The road ahead twisted and turned, a blur of trees and darkness. They couldn't outrun him forever.